I would like to take a moment to highlight, discuss, and remember with you a brief American history. The American Revolution. General Washington leads his troops across the Delaware, December 25th, 1776.
I have recently met with my Council of War, and we have decided we are crossing again back into the Jerseys and attacking the Hessian outpost in Trenton.
It has been suggested that the war in 1776, America gained her independence. But in the War of 1812, she was allowed to keep it. On the morning of September 14th, 1814, 35-year-old lawyer and POW Francis Scott Key witnessed the bombardment of Fort McHenry by British ships in Baltimore Harbor. He then saw a 30-foot by 42-foot oversized American flag, high and proud. He wrote a 4-stanza poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry, which contains these immortal words.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the clouds of the fight over the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming? And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave?
When the question was asked about the rights of the individual states, tensions rose, dividing the nation. The American Civil War. On the afternoon of Thursday, November 19th, 1863, 4.5 months after the Union armies defeated those of the Confederacy at the Battle of Gettysburg, President Abraham Lincoln spoke.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
June 28th, 1914. The assassination of Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand led the world into a conflict, pitting the Allies against the Central Powers. It was called the Great War. Today, we know it as World War I. On February 3rd, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson addressed Congress.
Property can be paid for. The lives of peaceful and innocent people cannot be. It is a war against all nations. The choice we make for ourselves must be made with a moderation of counsel and a temperateness of judgment befitting our character and our motives as a nation.
The world would again find itself at war 1 generation later. President Roosevelt, positioned as a champion of the people following the Great Depression, spoke to both houses of Congress, announcing U.S. involvement into the Second World War.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
December 1st, 1950, President Truman addressed the nation on why the U.S. must intervene into the Korean conflict to stop the threat of communism and to end this new Cold War.
Our homes, our nation, all the things we believe in are in great danger. This danger has been created by the rulers of the Soviet Union. The future of civilization depends on what we do now and in the months ahead.
As the Cold War continued, the threat of a third World War loomed. President Kennedy, April 20th, 1961.
Discuss briefly at this time the recent events in Cuba. On that unhappy island, as in so many other arenas of the contest for freedom, the news has grown worse instead of better. I have emphasized before that this was a struggle of Cuban patriots against a Cuban dictator. While we could not be expected to hide our sympathies, we made it repeatedly clear that the armed forces of this country would not intervene in any way. If the nations of this hemisphere should fail to meet their commitments against outside communist penetration, then I want it clearly understood that this government will not hesitate in meeting its primary obligations, which are to the security of our nation.
In 1962, America entered the ongoing Second Indochina War, which had begun in 1955. The people of that nation looked upon our entry as a turning point, and calling it the Resistance War against America. We, in the States, referred to it as the Vietnam War. On January 23, 1973, in a speech from the Oval Office that was broadcast on both radio and television, President Nixon announced an accord had been reached to end the war in Vietnam.
I have asked for this radio and television time tonight for the purpose of announcing that we today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia. Within 60 days from this Saturday, all Americans held prisoners of war throughout Indochina will be released. There will be the fullest possible accounting for all of those who are missing in action. During the same 60-day period, all American forces will be withdrawn from South Vietnam.
Direct U.S. military involvement ended on August 15th of 1973. The capture of Saigon by the North Vietnamese Army in April of 1975 marked the end of the war. In the 1980s, the Cold War continued. American forces faced an Islamic Jihad organization in Lebanon and a Cuban military presence in Grenada. We drove both out of power. On October 27, 1983, President Reagan addressed the nation.
Brave young men have been taken from us. Many others have been grievously wounded. Are we to tell them their sacrifice was wasted? They gave their lives in defense of our national security every bit as much as any man who ever died fighting in a war. We must not strip every ounce of meaning and purpose from their courageous sacrifice. We're a nation with global responsibilities. We're not somewhere else in the world protecting someone else's interests. We're there protecting our own.
In the early 1990s, America faced a situation abroad in which a dictator invaded a neighboring land. Many felt the actions of Saddam Hussein paralleled the actions of Adolf Hitler, and the world chose not to permit atrocities such as those repeat. President Bush, himself a World War II veteran, addressed the nation regarding involvement in what was to be called the Gulf War, July 16, 1991.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
America has proud traditions caring for those who may otherwise be unable to care for themselves. President Bush began a relief campaign in the nation of Somalia, a nation plagued with drought, and a regime who kept the relief for themselves while others faced disease, starvation, and death. On October 7, 1993, President Clinton addressed the nation following a horrifying act performed by those who opposed our helping those in need.
Today I want to talk with you about our nation's military involvement in Somalia. This past weekend, we all reacted with anger and horror as an armed Somali gang desecrated the bodies of our American soldiers and displayed a captured American pilot. All of them soldiers who were taking part in an international effort to end the starvation of the Somali people themselves.
Throughout the 1990s, terrorism seem to be on the rise around the world. Due to time constraints, we will be unable to discuss each act, but this in no way takes away from their importance or tragedy. February 26, 1993, the World Trade Center bombing took the lives of 6 and injured over 1,000. April 19, 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing took the lives of 168 and injured nearly 700. October 12, 2000, the USS Cole was attacked by Al-Qaeda suicide bombers, killing 17, injuring 39. September 11, 2001, America faced her worst terrorist attack. President Bush addressed the nation.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger.
Today, our bravest men and women face a new enemy, which actually seems to be just an old enemy with new packaging.
Tonight I want to speak to you about what the United States will do with our friends and allies to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL. As Commander-in-Chief, my highest priority is the security of the American people. Over the last several years, we have consistently taken the fight to terrorists who threaten our country. We took out Osama bin Laden and much of al-Qaeda's leadership in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We've targeted al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen and recently eliminated the top commander of its affiliate in Somalia. At this moment, the greatest threats come from the Middle East and North Africa, where radical groups exploit grievances for their own gain. And one of those groups is ISIL, which calls itself the Islamic State.
Memorial Day is a holiday set aside to honor all who fell in the line of duty in the name of the United States.
No child of God should ever suffer such horror.
Today, the day more or less commemorates the unofficial start of summer. It's a 3-day weekend. A weekend of barbecues, outdoor activities, and fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not as long as you remember those who paid the ultimate price, made the ultimate sacrifice, all for your freedom.